Thank you for joining us for the Lifelong Learning at Home series presented by the Laurier Association for Lifelong Learning. For over 20 years, the Laurier Association for Lifelong Learning has been offering unique adult learning opportunities on Laurier's Waterloo and Brantford campuses. Our non-credit courses are intended for personal interest and self-education. We're pleased to offer you this opportunity to learn from your own home and are excited to be joined today by James Skidmore. James Skidmore is the director of the Waterloo Centre for German Studies, a research institute at the University of Waterloo. A member of the Department of Germanic and Slavic Studies since 2000, James studied at the University of Saskatchewan before earning his PhD at Princeton University. Professor Skidmore's research focuses on the representation of political and social change in contemporary German language, literature, and film. He's also an award-winning instructor who specializes in online and open education. Thank you for joining us today, James. We'll now turn it over to you for your lecture, Good Art, Bad Artists, Admiring the Work of Artists We Despise.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for to all of you who are here and attending this session. It's wonderful to see the Laurier Association for Lifelong Learning putting this together. So big thanks to Jen and Lindsay and everyone. It's wonderful to see them put this together, and I'm honored to be part of it. I'm honored to have been asked to give this lecture on good art, bad artists. I hope before I begin, I just want to say I hope everyone's doing okay. It's been such a disruptive few weeks during this pandemic, and I hope you're all well and that you continue to be well and that you all get through this in fine fettle. So I'm going to give you this lecture, and this lecture is about three artists. And those three artists are Leni Riefenstahl, a filmmaker, Emil Nolde, and a painter, and Peter Handke, a writer. They're all German language speaking artists. They all come from the German speaking world. Two of them are dead, one is still alive. And they've all been involved in really strong or really intense controversies about their art, their creative work, and their lives, and especially their political stances during their lifetimes, or the political stances that we see in their works. And so I'm going to focus on these three, and I want to look at these controversies and understand something. I want us to, by looking at them, analyzing these controversies, we start to understand something about them. And then I want to broaden out into a larger discussion about as we compare these controversies and we discuss what these controversies can teach us about art and teach us about how we view and consume art and think about art. And so I hope you'll find this interesting. I think a couple of these names might be familiar to you. Some won't be, perhaps. And I hope that this lecture, this relatively quick introduction to these works and to the controversies, will give you a lot of food for thought. It's really, I don't want to tell you how to think about these artists or about the controversies so much as to see the questions that we need to be asking, to hear those questions and to think about those questions that we need to be asking about these works and these controversies. I'm going to start with Leni Riefenstahl, who is a famous filmmaker, lived an incredibly long time, 101 years, and was very active. She was diving in her 90s. She was doing underwater film work in her 90s. An amazing woman in terms of physical constitution. She was a dancer originally and was in Berlin, was trying to make it as a dancer and a performer, and was seen by Arnold Fanck, who was he was a filmmaker, and he was making what were called Bergfilme, films that were set in the mountains. And so she became very famous as one of his leading stars in these mountain films. The most famous, or one of the most famous ones, being The Holy Mountain. She also made her own Bergfilm, her own mountain film called The Blue Light, but it was a different film. We'll talk about that. And then what she's most famous for are her two films during the Third Reich, Triumph of the Will, Triumph des Willens, and Olympia, the two films of the 1936 Berlin Olympics. The Holy Mountain, her first film, where she came to the attention of the viewing public in Germany. Kind of a cheesy film, a woman goes to the mountains because she meets this man, then this other man falls in love with her, and then there's an issue as to who loves her and those kinds of things. So not very important. The reason I'm showing you these pictures, these stills from the film, especially the second one there, just gives you a sense of they filmed these right in the mountains, so they did a lot of outdoor shooting for these, and it's incredible to see the kinds of things they did for that. That's really impressive. But that opening shot there, that top shot, this is the story is this is a woman who lives by the sea, and what have you, and then goes to the mountains. But there's this dance scene where she was able to do her dancing, her interpretive dance in front of the camera. And what's interesting about that is that when Hitler saw this film and saw this dance scene, he fell, I don't want to say he fell in love with her, but he fell in deep admiration of her. And this brought her to Hitler's attention. The first film that she really did everything in terms of directing and then also acting is called Das Blaue Licht, the blue light, and a 1932 film. And it's a mountain film as well. It's set in the mountains. She plays a kind of a wild mountain woman who's a bit thought of as a bit strange by other people in the area. But she's discovered the secret of this blue light that's emanating from the mountains. People think she's a witch, and there's then there's all these. She's hunted down a little bit, and these two posters, one from the poster of the film, and the other from the leading film magazine of Germany in the 20s and 30s, illustrate this the kind of fear and trepidation she's involved with. You'll also notice that it's also, especially the poster with the bare shoulder, etc., really stresses like the sexual nature of this. Not that it was overtly sexual in the way, like say a Marlene Dietrich film might have been, but certainly there's a it's film, right? So you have to do what you can to attract people to your film. Now, the blue light came out in 1932. And in 1933, the National Socialists assumed power in Germany under Adolf Hitler. And whenever I talk about National Socialism in a lecture, I always like to show this poster and explain it, because in that poster you kind of get an immediate kind of distillation of National Socialist ideology. And the poster is entitled Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one empire, one leader. And why that's important is that what that distills in terms of the notion of what is it to be German? What is it to be National Socialist, and what is it to be a nation under National Socialism? Is that the point of Nazism was that it came out after the First World War, Germany in disarray with the abdication of the Kaiser and the loss of the war. And the National Socialists are trying to restore order and restore a sense of Germany and a sense of German pride and a sense of Germanness. And so they need unity to do this. And so the notion of unity is very strong in this poster. One people, one empire, one leader. When we talk about one people, well, of course, we're saying one German people. So it's immediately prejudice towards Germans, and then, of course, against, for example, Jews. And National Socialism was founded on one of the pillars of National Socialism was its anti-Semitism. One empire after the First World War, Germany lost certain lands and territories that had belonged to it previously, and there was a sense that the country needed to bring these people back home into the empire. And so this idea of one empire was a quick keyword to explain that. And then a very strong central leadership under the Führer, strong in the sense of directing the cultural and political life of the country. And I say cultural, and I say it first because Hitler and many of the leading Nazis around him were very obsessed with the notion that German culture had suffered under modernism, had suffered under the way the world was going in the early 20th century, and they needed to restore the country's true culture, and that true culture could only be restored with the strong guiding hand of the leader, the supreme leader, in this case, Adolf Hitler. Now, the reason I mention this is that because, of course, then Leni Riefenstahl, through her contacts in the film world, and especially with her the admiration that Hitler had shown her in her work, she was very much in the attention. She captured the attention of people like Hitler, and she was approached then about making a film of the Nazi party rallies. And the first, she did films of two of these, the 1933 rally, which these always occurred in September. The Nazis came to power at the end of January 1933, so there was a rally in September, always held in Nuremberg in Bavaria. And she'd filmed the first one, but it was that film was lost for many years. It was really more snippets. It wasn't really a full-fledged film. And then a proper kind of arrangement was made that she would do the 1934 party rally in Nuremberg in September of 1934. And so even though she denies it, she was involved in the preparations of the party rally. Albert Speer was charged with organizing it, but she had some involvement in that. And she was given enough money and enough editorial and artistic control that she could bring a very large team of a very large crew of cameramen and others to do this production. I think it's something around 170 people were in her production team for the party rally. The rally would take place over a period of about a week, and she was there that entire time. But she was also there previously to establish, what's going. She needed to know where things were happening in the rally and where she would be filming, etc. She filmed many hours of film and distilled it then down to a couple of hours. And the words of Hitler there speak for themselves. I think the Nazis were very happy with what the film had produced. Now, when we look at the poster of the film, and we see these eagles in stills from the film, we notice that the German eagle with the swastika play a big role in terms of the promotion of the film, etc. But what we need to remember is that the film was really, one could say, first and foremost, an advertisement of Hitler as the leader of this party. And even though a party rally would have thousands of people attending and have various events and activities and things going on, the film composes it has to take all this hours of filming that it's done and bring it down into 2 hours. And so there are certain things in the film that have to be there. And one is, of course, this presentation of Hitler as, and this still from the film shows like using a camera angle that's artistic, right? Take some, you have to compose that kind of a shot, but it makes him look very powerful. It makes him look very majestic even. And so it's things like that you see that the film is very much constructed. It's not a newsreel, and Riefenstahl would say that herself. I didn't want to do a newsreel. I wanted to do a proper film about the rally. And so when she does that, she creates, she's able to manage the impression of reality as to the reality going on at the party rally through like basically narrative construction, visuals and narrative construction. So she's controlling cinematography, sound, editing, and producing a film that is much more than any sort of newsreel or sort of standard news documentary of the time, at any rate. I'm passing over now to a couple of stills from the film, just to make a couple of points about some of the ideas that the film propagated that corresponded to the notion of the Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. The bottom picture there on the screen shows a woman running up to present a bouquet of flowers from her and her child. I believe that's an unscripted moment, that it just occurred during the rally as Hitler was being driven down through the streets of Nuremberg. But it's a powerful image that's captured because Riefenstahl has a camera in the car with Hitler, and that presents this in such a way that would be much different than if you had the camera just on the street on the side watching this. The top picture shows a workers' corps of the Nazis. They weren't allowed to, under the Versailles Treaty, they weren't allowed to build their army up over a certain number, but they built a very large worker or labor corps, and that labor corps was then as kind of a pre-army kind of training corps. A lot of people view it that way. What's interesting is that in the film, and I'm sorry that I can't show you clips from the film because of the technology we're using to do this lecture, we can't then bring in clips from the film, but I provide, in the resources I provided for you, there's a link to a version of the film that you can watch online. Anyways, when this scene is filmed with the members of this labor corps, the part of it is where one of the workers yells out, "Comrade, where are you from?" And then different comrades will say where they're from, and the camera is right at each one of these people. So it's staged, obviously, right? It's been put together. It didn't just happen naturally as part of the rally. But it gives us a sense of the kind of the political context of that the film was made in, because as each of they're seeing where they're from all sorts of different places in the German Reich, and so it's giving you the sense of the breadth of the German Reich. But the last person who says something, and they say, "Where are you from?" and he says, "I'm from the Tsar." And the Tsar is said so emotionally, and it's because the Tsar was under French occupation. There was one of the things the Nazis were trying to do is get the Tsar back into Germany, and they were going to take it back and things like this. And so there were these kinds of political issues taking place, and a lot of commentators on the film aren't aware of that. They don't know that scene, for example, is actually very very political in many ways. Now, in speaking about the technique of the film and Riefenstahl's work on the film, yes, friendly with Hitler, knew Hitler, socialized with Hitler and Goebbels. Here's a still from with Riefenstahl in the frame. It's just I don't think it's in the actual film. It's a picture of her, probably from one of her crew. And we have in the film, we have a number of people dressed in traditional costume greeting Hitler when he arrives at his hotel, and this is part of that. What's more interesting is the picture on the right of your screen. And there we have the Nazi banners that hung at one end of the major field where the rally took place. And we see a little elevator with Riefenstahl and a camera in the elevator. And this was a very this was innovative filmmaking at the time, that she put a camera there and the elevator could go up to the top. This is, I don't know how many feet that is, but it's really quite high. It's a couple of stories high. And the camera is able to go up and then film larger swaths of the whole rally. And on this next slide, you'll see a picture will come up now of the whole rally, and that's a still from the film taken from that camera that's going up the elevator. And if you watch the film, this is an incredible scene, because the camera starts at the bottom as Hitler in the middle of the three men in the middle, and then the leader of the SS on his right, and the leader of the SA. So the SS, that's the Himmler's group, and the SAS, the stormtroopers. They're walking from one side of the field to the other, and they're walking to pay a respect to the fallen comrades of the struggle, of the movement, of the Nazi movement. The camera starts at the bottom and rises up as they walk towards this to this memorial. And there's stillness in the crowd. We hear music of a kind of a funeral dirge, and it's an incredibly moving scene. It's liturgical in its effect, and it really sets apart the whole event. And why that's and so as just a piece of stage managed theater, it's incredible. But what's also interesting about it is that it has a very important political point to be made here. In June of 1934, so only 2 months at the end of June, so 2 months before this event took place, was an event in Nazi Party history, in German history, called the Night of the Long Knives. Excuse me. At the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler had arrested and eventually murdered close to 200 Nazis, leaders particularly of the stormtroopers, Julius Röhm and others, and because he saw them as rivals. And this was quite an event. This really disrupted the Nazi Party, because the stormtroopers just saw their leadership wiped out by another wing of the party. And so this event here, as he walks across the field with the leaders of both of those wings of the party, the SS and the SA, with him, was to establish that the party was unified after this event. And it's a brutal event. I mean, there was no due process. These were revenge killings, or preemptive revenge killings in a way. And it's captured on film here with such power and such magnitude that knowing that historical context only adds to the what I call the liturgical nature of this event. So what's the controversy around the film? I guess it's pretty obvious, but let's talk about it anyways. So the Triumph of the Will, is it a history? Is it a documentary? Is it propaganda? And if we think of it, and some people said it was history. Riefenstahl said, "Oh, it's history. I was just filming history." We think of it as history or documentary, we are, as viewers, likely to be more accepting of it as truthful, that this represents what happened. And yes, we can do that, but that's problematic. As Mary Devereaux has pointed out, and I believe I've misspelled her name on the slide there, the film is disturbing because it's beautiful and evil. It's art. It's art that can make evil appear to be beautiful and good. And the beauty of it comes from the construction of the film, the way Riefenstahl took hours and hours and hours of film, and she spent 5 months editing the film down into this package of scenes that have a narrative arc, that have the ebb and flow of drama, and took something that could have just been newsreel and turned it into art. And as then Susan Sontag points out, in Triumph of the Will, that the image isn't a record of reality, because reality has now been constructed to serve the image. And that's exactly what Riefenstahl does in her work on the film. And so she has created a film of real power by using the techniques of cinema editing, cinematography, sound, bringing those all together to create a powerful film, a powerful work of art. What was Riefenstahl's position on all of this? Well, she says, she agreed that the film was powerful because of what she had done, what she had put into it in terms of how she had brought her artistic work and her artistic sensitivity to the project. And she says, that she's claimed throughout her life that she was always and only interested in beauty and never in politics. And she says in a film interview at one point that if an artist dedicates himself totally to his work, he can't think politically. So she says there's no politics in her making of the film. And so because of that, she claims she had no role in popularizing Nazism. The film was, we don't know, we don't have exact viewing numbers for how many people saw the film, but the film was highly praised by the Nazi leadership. People who saw it were amazed by it because they'd never seen so much footage of Hitler and such good quality footage of Hitler. And so a lot of people responded very positively to it. But she denied having any role in that. She denied having any social contact with Hitler. There's an amazing film scene in the film The Wonderful Horrible Life of Leni Riefenstahl, where the director says, well, but I have Goebbels' diaries here where he said that he went out with you one night with his wife, and you went there to his place for drinks, etc. I never did that. So she denies these kinds of contacts because she feels it implicates her in the political and then the criminal activity of the Nazis. And she says, if she had known what the Nazis would have done, she would never have participated in this. And she also says that for her, the film, she says she's never been proud of the film, which is, when you hear her talk about the film, she's very proud of what she did with that film. She's very proud of her work because her work as an artist means so much to her. But she says that she would never have made, if she had known what the film would bring to her, which is namely, she never had a film. She tried to do one film during the Third Reich. And then after that, she just gave up filming. She couldn't make film. Nobody would want her to make a film. And so she claims that if she'd known this ahead of time, she wouldn't have done the film. Who's to say? Anyway, so that's the controversy around Leni Riefenstahl. Let's go to our next artist. And our next artist is Emil Nolde. And Emil Nolde was born Emil Hansen, but he took his name then after the town he was born in, Nolde. And he was born in Schleswig-Holstein. And Schleswig-Holstein, right at the time he was born, was kind of, there was a back and forth between Germany and Denmark as to where the border was and which parts belonged to Germany and which parts belonged to Denmark. And so that area has a number of people who are, there's a mixture in terms of language and culture. And so, but he identified much more with the German side of things. So changed his name to Nolde, Hansen being a very kind of Nordic name. He was a painter. His themes were religious, mythic themes, landscapes, flowers. What's important about Nolde, what's especially important about Nolde, is that he was one of the leading artists of the expressionist movement, or of German expressionism. Now, expressionism was a movement. Movements are funny things, right? Because artistic movements, especially, because you can't. Some artistic movements are very rigid in terms of you have to do this, this, and this to be part of our movement. This wasn't like that, but it was clear that groups of artists, for example, Die Brücke, the bridge, a small group of artists that sort of started in Dresden, and which Nolde was briefly a member. They took a certain approach to art that was different. It was new, and it was in the early 1900s. And really, one of the key aspects of it is the subjectivity, the subjective nature of the artwork. It wasn't about it wasn't about art capturing reality or nature or the natural, anything like that. It wasn't about an objective art. It was about a subjective art that registered and recorded and expressed the emotional response of an artist. And I like this quotation from Alberto Arbasino: "Expressionism doesn't shun, pardon me, expressionism doesn't shun the violently unpleasant effect." So it's art that's going to stand up and confront you. It's not art that's aiming to please you or to give you the warm fuzzies, as it were. Say like no, pardon me, say in the way that Impressionism did, right? Impressionism is very beautiful to look at. You look at a Monet or a Manet and you, oh, isn't that lovely? It's just beautiful and just soft and lovely. Expressionism wasn't about that. And the other thing about like the expressionism was clearly a generational break. And we see that from this programmatic statement that was made by Die Brücke in 1906. "We call all young people together, and as young people who carry the future in us, we want to wrest freedom for our actions and our lives from the older, comfortably established forces." And this is the way of art, and this is the way of life, isn't it? The younger generation, the young Turks, have to come in and, no, we can't do it that way. We are going to do it a new way. And expressionism was very much a part of that. It was very much a part of this generational change. It marked a generational change in art. Now I want to show you a couple of Nolde's paintings from this that really exemplify his expressionist work. We're going to look at two paintings of Nolde that really kind of demonstrate his expressionistic technique. The first one is this self-portrait of him from 1917, and we see there you look at the eyes. The eyes just blare out at you in their blueness, and then the contrasting between the dark shades and the light shades, the way his face is shaded partially, and then the broad brushstrokes, the thick paint brushstrokes. The paint is thick. When you see the canvas up close, the paint is it's in little ridges. It comes off of the canvas. Pardon me. And it's an incredible effect when you look at that self-portrait. It's striking. You can't help but not look at, and you can't help but not look at the eyes. At least I find that. That's my feeling there. The other painting I wanted to look at, and I'm sorry the quality of this one isn't quite as good as the previous one, is the Lost Paradise, or it's also known as Adam and Eve. And you can see Adam on the left, Eve on the right, the snake and the apple tree in the middle. And it's the story of Adam and Eve and being expelled at some point from the garden, and because of the snake and the apple. But what's interesting about the painting is when you see some very kind of common expressionist techniques, the strong color use, the oversized hands or features of the body, the eyes again, they're those. Eve seems to have. I'll just go back to the self-portrait. You see those eyes in the self-portrait of Nolde, and you see those eyes in Eve, right? They capture your attention. Less so Adam. Adam's looking elsewhere, but Eve is looking right at us and expressing something, I think. So just a couple of examples, just so you see the kind of art that Nolde was making at sort of a heyday of his in the late 19-teens and then into the 1920s. Now Nolde, of course, was also an artist during the Third Reich, and it's important then to think about art in the Third Reich. And we need to think about this because a key aspect of the Third Reich, a key aspect of the Nazi movement was the attempt by the Nazi movement to change the direction of German culture. They felt German culture was becoming too modernistic. Expressionism would have been, too modern to their tastes, and especially to the tastes of somebody like Adolf Hitler, who himself had been a painter. And when we look at art in the Third Reich, we have the opportunity to contrast sort of state approved art and art that was rejected by the state. And we have this because there were two famous exhibitions held at the same time across the street from each other in Munich, and then they would travel as well. The one was the Great German Art Exhibition, the Große Deutsche Kunstausstellung. You see a poster for it there from 1937, and it was held a few years, it was held annually. And then we'll talk about the other exhibition in a few minutes. But the Große Deutsche Kunstausstellung was the art exhibition that was meant to promote the work of artists who fit into the cultural conceptions of the Nazis. And we see this quotation from Hitler, you know, about the new age of today is at work on a new human type. And that new human type is about strength and beauty. And, you know, it's from this strength and beauty streams forth a new feeling of life and a new joy in life. And he was speaking about this at the opening of this exhibition. And it points out how he's connecting art to this idea that we could, through art and culture, we will transform the German people. And so they, just a couple of paintings, not necessarily from that exhibition, but a couple of famous paintings that are often used as examples of that Nazi approach to art, if I can call it that. Adolf Wissel's The Kallenberg Farm Family takes a kind of a scene, a style of portraiture that you would see in the Renaissance, right, with the picture of a family or a person with the background of the estate behind them, etc. But in this case, it's a down-to-earth working family. You might think they look sad, but it's not that they're sad. It's that they're serious, they're somber, and they're good people. We see them. They're just simple people. The kids are playing with simple things. When you look at that painting, it's timeless in a way. You can't pinpoint a time. There's nothing there that would tell you this is 1939. It could be 1839, for all you know. And that's of course, Germany was a very modern state, and the Nazis used all the modern methods of communication and industry, etc., to promote and to do what they were trying to do. Yet they tried to promote a nostalgia for and a sense of self-understanding that harkened back to, say, earlier or simpler times. Another aspect of German art of this period was its reliance on classical myth and classical tropes. And by classical, I mean of the Roman and especially the Greek periods. And the point of this here was that the idea that classical form of human being, that humanity had come a long way from that and needed to get back to it. And this painting of the four elements, kind of, you know, the four elements there of fire and earth and water and what have you are represented in a more modern way than they might have been represented in years prior to this, many years prior to this. But there's a certain classical feel to it as well. It's a triptych. What's interesting about this one, this hung in Hitler's office for a while, so we know that it appealed to him. And yeah, and I just show it as an example of that. This fascination with the classical style of artistic representation became very present or very visible in some of the sculpture work that was promoted by the Nazis, especially that of Josef Thorak and Arnold Brecker. And we see two examples there. The one on the left from Thorak is from the German pavilion at the World Fair in Paris in 1937. And it's a picture that I think that's a Dutch family getting its picture taken in front of that massive sculpture called Comradeship. And what's interesting is that the classical sculptural form of the human body is exaggerated beyond belief, right? Those bodies are unnatural. And so they've taken this classical ideal and kind of amped it up to stress more the power and the strength and the determination and the invincibility of the Nazi ideals. The picture on the right, that's one from the German Historical Museum, and that's Arnold Brecker's sculpture of the army, which that's not the original, but one of those stood at the entrance of the Chancellery in Berlin, where Hitler had his office. Now, that was art of the sort of the approved art of the Third Reich. Now we come to the non-approved art of the Third Reich, the degenerate art of the Third Reich. And so this exhibition that was held across the street from the Great German Art Exhibition was the Entartete Kunst exhibition, the degenerate art exhibition. And it collected, the Nazi government and the cultural ministry, propaganda ministry, had collected numerous works of art that it felt were degenerate, that it felt were anti-German, because they did not glorify the German body the way the way the Nazis were hoping to do through art. And we see in this again, Hitler, from his speaking at the Great German Art Exhibition, he's pointing out how bad this degenerate art can be, even though he's speaking at the good art exhibition, right, of the Great German Art Exhibition. He's pointing out, and notice how he talks at one point. He says, you know, this defective vision, it came as if it came about through heredity. There, he's basically, that's code word for, well, maybe they're these Jewish artists, and it's a very anti-Semitic kind of statement here. It can be read that way. And so he basically sort of claims what's degenerate. Now the thing is, we're talking about this because in Emil Nolde's paintings were part of the degenerate art exhibition. So here we see, here we have a picture of Goebbels going through the degenerate art exhibition, and on the left at the top is a Nolde painting of Jesus Christ and the Sinner. And let me just go and show you then a close-up of that painting. So you see how, when you see the painting in close-up, you see how expressionistic it is. Again, with the eyes, the bold colors, the rough style of the human body, how it's portrayed, etc. Very expressionistic, and therefore part of the degenerate art exhibition. Another one of his paintings, the Life of Christ, which was it was a multi-panel painting, is shown here in an exhibition room. And here, then, let me show you then a color version of it. And there you see it painted in 1912, and you see again the expressionist, the hallmarks of Nolde's expressionistic painting, the colors, the contrasts. Look at those eyes and how they express things, the colors of the skins, etc. The contrast between shading and light, etc. There's so much there. We could spend hours talking about this. Now, to give you an idea, just as to the contrast, why Hitler would not have liked this art, let's take a look at a painting that Hitler made in 1912, the same year as the Life of Christ. Here's a picture that Hitler created of the Vienna Opera House from 1912, and you see how his style of painting is at the opposite end of the spectrum compared to Nolde. So where does that leave us? Nolde, during the Third Reich, was banned from exhibiting and selling art. He was even banned from painting, which is the inspiration for a famous novel in Germany. And then after the war, Nolde was celebrated as being a great artist because he had been a victim of the Nazis. And this notion was encouraged by Nolde, definitely encouraged by him. But the controversy around Nolde has really flamed up in the past year or so, when a new exhibition was held about Nolde's work during the Third Reich. And this was held in the gallery in Berlin. And in that exhibition, they asked the two of the paintings from that exhibition were in the offices of Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany. One of the paintings was the Flower Garden from 1915. This is one of Nolde's. This is, again, you see the techniques he's using here are similar to the other paintings we've seen so far, the bold use of paint and the thickness of the strokes and all of that. But what's different, of course, is that it's just a scene of flowers and a garden and what have you. But that painting was requested for the exhibition to show a contrast with some other things. And then another painting of his, which was the opening slide of this presentation, Breakers from 1936. So both of these paintings were in Merkel's office. And she wasn't the only German politician to have these paintings in her office. This picture from 1982 is from the Chancellery, the Chancellor's office in Bonn at that time. Helmut Schmidt was Chancellor, and this is another painting of Nolde's, the sunflowers of the high sunflowers from 1926. And so this just shows that painting was being hung at that time. And just to give you a sense of what his sunflowers could look like, here's a nice painting of it from 1932. Again, very Noldean, if we can say that. So the controversy arose then because in that exhibition, the argument was made that Nolde really wasn't so much a victim of the Third Reich as he was a supporter of the Third Reich. Now, we thought of him as a victim because his work was in the degenerate art exhibitions. He was effectively banned from painting, and this victim image was maintained after the war as well by him and by his heirs. But the thing is that what the people who had organized the exhibition had discovered is that Nolde was really, and they found this out by being able to gain access finally to certain papers and documents and things. They discovered that he was anti-Semitic, deeply anti-Semitic, really. He tried to attach his artistic legacy to this German renewal of the Third Reich. My art is deeply rooted in the soil of the homeland. He tried to curry favor with leaders of the Nazi Party, with Hitler and others. Hitler didn't like his art. Others did like his art. He was a controversial figure within the Nazi Party as well, in a way. Some liked his work and wanted to promote it. Others didn't. And so after the war, he suppressed his anti-Semitic and pro-Hitler feelings throughout his life. And his anti-Semitism really was rooted in kind of a careerism. He wasn't the only anti-Semitic artist in Germany at the time. Absolutely not. A lot of modernists were. Other expressionists, even members of Die Brücke, where he'd been a member of, were anti-Semitic. So that wasn't anything new. But the controversy arose when then these paintings were requested from Merkel, and she said, yes, you can have them. And by the way, I don't need them back. You can keep them, which was very, they're part of the German government owns these paintings, and so they get, moved around. But she was very clear that, no, you can keep these. I don't need them back. She didn't want to touch anything that had this aura of, this problematic aura to it. Let's leave Nolde now, and let's go and talk about our third artist, Peter Handke. Now, with Peter Handke, I won't be as extensive in discussing his work as I have been with the other two, but he's a living author, and he's just won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and so he's been in the news. And I wanted to discuss him because what's going on with him is quite interesting. He's a major avant-garde writer of the 1960s and 70s. His works are really quite interesting. I'll show you a couple of posters from some of his works. So, for example, two of his plays. Here we have the Publikumsbeschimpfung, offending the audience, which is a play where the actors are complaining about things, etc. And at a certain point, they just turn to the audience and they just start swearing at the audience and telling the audience, it's your fault that it's like this. You're the problem. You're this. You're that. It really put him on the map in the 1960s. This other play, a later play, and this is a poster from the National Theatre in London, The Hour We Knew Not of Each Other. The Hour We Knew Nothing of Each Other. A later play. It's extremely interesting, though. It's 100 minutes long. No words are spoken. You have 27 actors playing 450 roles. And they come on stage, they do a little something, they walk off, they come back on as a different character. The stage is just this constant back and forth of people. That's why I like the poster so much, because the people walking across, that's what's going on the stage. That's very avant-garde. And he is creative like that in a way that very few other artists have been. Handke has also worked in film, and his most famous film, I think, is the film that he's been most famous for, I think, is his work with the Wim Wenders on Der Himmel über Berlin, or The Wings of Desire. This is a wonderful film from 1987. I teach it in courses quite a bit. Students don't like it that much because it's very slow, it's very meditative, it's very, I think it's very thought-provoking, but it's not, you wouldn't call it an action film. I'm showing you a screenshot of Bruno Ganz, who plays this angel who wishes to become human. And so during the film, he's able to hear thoughts, and as an angel, he hears everybody's thoughts, and he's able to hear these thoughts and vocalize them. And this shows this happening. And this is where Handke comes in, because Handke's writing a lot of the text for the film. In this one scene, als das Kind Kind war, wusste es nicht, dass es Kind war. Alles war ihm beseelt. As the child was a child, when the child was a child, it didn't know it was a child. Everything was full of life, and all life was one. It goes on. And it's beautifully poetic. It's beautifully lyrical. And it adds so much to this film, to its ethereal quality. And so it's an incredible contribution on the part of Handke to the film. Now, what Handke has become controversial for is his work called his work that's been about Serbia, his writings on Serbia, travel writings on Serbia. Handke was born in Austria, but his mother was Slovenian, which was part of Yugoslavia. And so he feels a certain attachment to Yugoslavia. And he felt that during the Yugoslavian wars of the 1990s, he felt that the media coverage of that was too one-sided. He felt that Serbia was not being understood. And his understanding of the situation was mainly that as Yugoslavia was breaking up, Serbia was the one part of Yugoslavia that was trying to hold it together. So he viewed the Serbian political engagement, especially of Slobodan Milosevic, to be very much about keeping Yugoslavia together, which he thought as being very important for combating. Yugoslavia was a country that had evolved in one form after the Second World War, and he saw it as being sort of anti-fascist and anti Third Reich, if you will. And he writes about it, and he writes about it in such a, like, his writing is so particular that when you read what he's writing about the Yugoslavian wars, it's kind of difficult to understand. But if you know that he's writing to kind of give a voice to Serbia, then it makes more sense. So that little quotation that I've put there on the screen for you, where he talks about the folk of the Serbians and the unjust feelings they're having, etc. He's trying to express that in a form that's unusual, because it's not straightforward. The controversy continued when he then attended Slobodan Milosevic's funeral. And in that funeral, he gave a little speech, and he basically was trying to say the same thing that he'd said before. He explained his speech by saying, that he was just hearing so much that was just not allowing other language to be heard, meaning, that we weren't hearing about from the Serbians. And so he gave a little, I don't know if you'd call it a eulogy, but he gave a little statement to the assembled mourners. And he says, the so-called world is absent, and the so-called world is not the world, and I don't know the truth, but I look, I hear, I feel, I remember, I question. Very much a part of Handke's technique is to present himself as an observer, and he's just observing and then funneling what he observes through language to his readers. But what the thing is, when you think of him at that funeral, is that he's there underneath this huge picture of Milosevic. People are mourning Milosevic as the great Serbian hero, whereas others are denigrating him as a war criminal and as a man who'd committed numerous crimes against humanity for leading the Serbians in the wars against Croatia, against Bosnia-Herzegovina, and trying to maintain a Yugoslav kind of nation. Now, when Handke was awarded the Nobel Prize, the citation emphasized the linguistic ingenuity of his writing, and we see that then also in the justification from some of the members of the Academy. And that last statement there by Olsen is particularly strong in its approach. This is a literary prize, not a political prize. And so they're awarding him on the body of his work, so those things we'd seen like Publikumsbeschimpfung or Wings of Desire, things like that, and not on what they would say, well, political writings. No, we're not awarding him we're not giving him the Nobel Prize for his politics, but for his linguistic approach to writing, his way with language in writing. But Handke has scandalized Europe for taking on the side of Serbia in the war against Serbia. Even Germany participated in the NATO campaign against Serbia in the 1990s. The first time the German army had fought outside of Germany, had been involved in any kind of military confrontation since the Second World War. And but everyone felt, no, this is a genocide that's taking place in the former Yugoslavia, or the Yugoslavia that's breaking up, and we need to put a stop to it. This is Europe, and we need to stop that in Europe. And but very few people then took the side of Serbia in the media and social discourse around it. Now, so he's been called has been called the Bob Dylan of genocide apologists, right? Bob Dylan, also a Nobel Prize winner for literature because of his lyrics, right? The poetry of his songs. And Stanislav, a German writer, both of these writers are of Bosnian heritage, called the award an aesthetic and political failure. So a failure on both aesthetic and political grounds. And Handke has just not entertained he's been very much against this. He's been very forthright in his defensiveness of his position. He says nothing that he's wrote should be thought of as anything but literature, and he's been very much he's blocked any kind of criticism. And he has the defense of Handke has been people like Knausgaard, famous Norwegian writer, who's also his Norwegian publisher. And Knausgaard acknowledges, as he says in this quotation, that how does he put it? This unique idiosyncratic presence, and but it's this ambiguity and complexity that language offered, charged with Handke's sympathies, which unlock this Pandora's box of grief, anger, and despair. So a lot of people what Knausgaard is saying basically is that people aren't understanding how the ambiguity. Of course, they have no time for ambiguity when they're so outraged that Handke might be supporting what they view as a genocidal regime, and which has been brought to court for the genocidal genocidal tendencies of Serbia. So in summarizing all of this, and I know we're coming to the end, and I'll take a few minutes then to summarize and to pose some questions for you. There are a lot of differences between these artists. Only Nolde has exhibited overt racism. Riefenstahl and Handke haven't. Riefenstahl and Handke have, as I say there, you know, their work is, you know, connected and identified with governments accused of war crimes, and this is less obvious with Nolde. Riefenstahl is stubborn. Handke is stubborn. Nolde hid what he knew would be unpopular positions. And finally, what's really interesting is that Riefenstahl's fame rests on the work that she did for the Nazis, whereas Handke and Nolde's fame doesn't. Nolde's fame isn't that he didn't do any work for the Nazis, and his fame rests on his expressionistic work. And Handke's fame really rests on his power over language that's exhibited in more major works of his. The essays, although a media, you know, even though they've upset so many people for legitimate reasons, they aren't a major part of his entire oeuvre. Similarities between these artists, though, are striking. They're all masters of their craft. They've all forged new ways of seeing the world, and they've had an influence on succeeding generations of artists. There's no doubt about that. So what issues does this raise for us? I think there's a couple of issues I've posed questions to there. You know, can art be separated from the context of its creation? Could it be separated from, you know, politics or ideology, etc.? But I'm particularly interested in this question about formalism and new criticism. In the 50s, and the new criticism was a literary interpretive approach, which really tried to separate art from artists. We said, let's just deal with the art, ignore everything about the writer, has nothing to do with it, but just judge the text on the text itself. Basically, judge not the message, but its expression. And this allows for an aesthetic distancing. But it's really difficult to do that, especially in our age, when celebrity media discourse really connects writers and artists and other entertainers, people in the creative world, with their work. And so what I'm wondering is, can we apply this to other kinds of controversies? And I've listed a few there, and I'll just mention a couple very quickly. So for example, Woody Allen, who many of you would know as a prolific filmmaker, has been accused of sexually assaulting his underage daughter. He had an affair with his adopted daughter, or the daughter of his partner, whom she had adopted. And so, no, it was her natural daughter. I'm sorry. And he had an affair with her and ended up marrying her. And so he's been seen as especially in the Me Too generation that we're living in, and the Me Too era. Woody Allen is seen as, well, my gosh, what's he doing with women? What's his approach what's his attitude towards women? And people have been re-examining his films, and oh my gosh, yeah, what's his attitude towards women is just, you know, a lot of people are finding it very difficult to enjoy Woody Allen films anymore, because they're seeing a lot of what they think are his personal proclivities coming out in his films. Now, Roman Polanski is similar in a way, because Roman Polanski he left the United States to avoid being put into jail or being, you know, found. He was involved in a situation too where he'd been accused of having sex with a minor, and he left the United States to avoid the prosecution, and is still he can't go back to the United States. He hasn't been back to the United States in decades. But he makes films still. He makes very good films, but they aren't personal. His latest film was about the Dreyfus case in France. Some people might say, well, maybe that is personal because he feels persecuted the way Dreyfus did, but not as intimately personal as is the case with Woody Allen. And then other of these are Michael Jackson. There's been a lot of people say they can't listen to Michael Jackson's music anymore. They used to love it when they were younger, but now that they know so much about Michael Jackson as a person, they can't listen to his music, so they're shunning his music. And so I look at this and I think about the two questions that Mary Devereaux raises in her work on Riefenstahl. And so the question she posed, what does it mean if we find a beautiful, what does it mean about us if we find beautiful a work of art that is evil? And so there she asked, well, it depends what we're responding to. Are we responding to the aesthetic, or are we responding to the content? And then the thing with a film like Triumph of the Will is that film is, it's trying to get us to take the step from admiring National Socialism to supporting National Socialism, or admiring the outward appearance of National Socialism, its strength, its beauty, its organization, all of that. The second question, how should the fact that a work of art is evil figure in our evaluation of it as a work of art? There we have to go back to things like we have to think about what is art, and we have to think about things like what Plato said. Plato, he thought art should engage mind and spirit and awake a longing or a desire for good. And as a result, that raises a question: is the unity of beauty and goodness the standard by which we should judge art? And if it is, then we'd have to say, and this is what Devereaux does, she says, well, no, with the Triumph of the Will, we have to judge that negatively because you don't have the unity of beauty and goodness. Now, with the work of Nolde, which you saw the paintings there of, say, the Breakers or the Flower Garden. It's beautiful. Is there a unity of beauty and goodness because the artist was anti-Semitic? But does that come out in the art? And those are the questions we have to ask every time we're confronted with one of these. These are the questions we need to ask. And I guess for me, what's important for me is that this question, what comes up now is, and this came up then with the Handke issue, is should we, in say my field, German studies, should we even teach Handke anymore? Should we be teaching Handke? Because Handke is this, he's supporting a genocidal regime, the Serbian regime. My feeling is, we have to be teaching these things. How else do we become aware of what art is and what art can be and how art can move or change us if we don't teach and look at the really tricky situations, like three of which I've described for you today, but of which there are many, many more, right? And then I gave you that list of the ones that are occurring today, like the especially the ones with the Me Too, in the Me Too era. So I think we need to teach these works of art and these situations that surround them, the entire context around them, because it's so important for us to understand what is really going on with art in its entirety. But I'll leave it there. I've talked for an hour, more than an hour, I believe, and I apologize if I've probably gone a little too longer than what the Laurier Association for Lifelong Learning wanted me to do. But I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your interest, for listening to this lecture. If you have any questions, any comments, you want to find out more information, etc., there's information on the webpage where this video is housed, but you can also contact me directly. My email address is there, my website address is there. Please get in touch anytime. And thanks again for all of your attention, and stay healthy and well during this pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James, for your lecture. James has provided, as he mentioned, some additional materials that you may wish to review following this lecture to further your learning. These materials have been provided on the course webpage. We know that learning has and always will be a social activity, so we encourage you to share this lecture with friends and family to discuss what you have learned today. If you'd like to learn more about the Laurier Association for Lifelong Learning, please visit wlu.ca/LALL. Thank you.